If you've ever wondered how to turn your podcast or YouTube channel into a long-term sustainable asset for your business, today's guest is the perfect example of what's possible. Doug Cunnington has been creating online content for over a decade, growing his YouTube channel to 129,000 subscribers, launching multiple successful courses, and mastering everything from SEO and affiliate marketing to productivity and evergreen funnels. And get this, his background? Engineering and project management. If he can build an audience and a thriving business with content, you can too. Doug has done it all in podcasting: solo episodes, interviews, roundtables, and even live unedited recordings. And today, he's pulling back the curtain in how financial professionals like you can find the simplest, most sustainable way to create content that grows your authority and tracks the right clients week after week. Doug, thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, and thanks for inviting me. I'm pumped to get into all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am excited to hear a little bit about your backstory and your journey, how you are, where you are today.
Sure. So I'll give the quick version. And currently, I have a couple podcasts. One is sort of more marketing and online business related, and the other one's kind of post-financial independence. And it's interesting how everything sort of came together because my background is computer engineering. I never used that degree. Ended up doing consulting, which I wasn't that great in a corporate environment, but I stuck it out for about 10 years before I got laid off in 2015, which is crazy. I've been working for myself for 10 years, and it suits me so much better. And, along the way, I created blogs and learned SEO and created online courses. And one of the reasons why I thought we could chat today is I was able to really take my course business and build trust with podcasting and YouTube. And I think, this kind of format I love because you could do so many different things, but at its core, the podcast and YouTube was really sort of the top end funnel and really helped my business grow. And I mean, the side benefit is it helped me communicate better just in a general sense. And yeah, I haven't looked back since, and I really love the format of podcasting and YouTube sort of together. I think they fit hand in hand. And I spend most of my time, producing the couple shows.
Awesome. So you led us down the path just perfectly because so many financial professionals are out there right now with this beautiful service-based business, whether they have team members or not, but they are helping people invest, helping people budget, long-term planning, all the things. And they're thinking, I've got to work on my online presence. And they may or may not have a clear vision of what that looks like for them. And there are so many different ways to go about it. So you mentioned your course. Talk to me a little bit about the process of, creating the course and then deciding, I need to market this, so I'm going to go this podcast route. Share that thought process with me, and it worked. So if you have any bumps along the road that you avoided well, and go ahead and share those.
Sure. It was, looking back, wiser now than I was. It was mostly bumps along the way, but I've navigated around a lot of those and just went through them. So a couple of key things, which I think it's beyond the scope of some of the stuff we'll talk about today, but if you want to dig into it, I would be happy to. So with the online courses, sometimes people think, I'm going to build this whole course. Video is kind of the way nearly everyone does it these days. And that's pretty difficult, right? There's some technical aspects or scripting. So I advise people, and I think most of the course platforms out there would advise people to pre-sell your course. Don't develop it in a vacuum and then try to sell it. You should be able to go to most course platforms and they have great education around it, and they can guide you in the right direction if you want to learn more. But basically, I pre-sold my courses, and that helped a lot because you know that you have at least a handful of customers. They've already prepaid. That's fairly common. You let people know expectations, and typically, you could roll it out week per week. The other great part with pre-selling is your procrastination completely goes away because you have a handful of people that have paid you a lot of money to deliver the course. So you figure it out. So it was super difficult. This was early on when I had my first video course. I didn't have all the camera gear. I didn't understand the mics. I didn't understand lighting or basically anything that I needed to know to produce a video. And I did it all myself. So it was pretty difficult. But I got a product out and I used, a teleprompter to have a clean delivery and scripted everything. It was a tremendous amount of work over probably 8 weeks or something like that. But like once it's done, then you can continue selling it. And once you get your reps in, you iterate upon this, it becomes much, much easier. And over time, I developed, the marketing skills to sell it better and to have successful launches and maybe partner with affiliates and just different pieces that you could add in there. And it ended up being, very lucrative. The margins are very high. And over time, you do have to update things. And a side piece of the story is over the last 5 years, the industry that I was in shifted a lot. So I slowly changed the courses. And then eventually in the last year, I sunset them. So even though it was lucrative, things changed. But, from a business standpoint, I was like, I need to shut this down and move on to something else. So I'll pause here. I talked a lot.
No, that's great. And I think you kind of answered a question that I had in my mind, but I'm going to let you share about it a little more. But how do you think courses are going to do today in 2025? It's a bit different than the world was in 2018. Algorithms have changed. So much has changed. What do you think that would look like for a 2025 creator?
I think one of the huge values in a course is taking the information that is out there, because let's face it, you could go to YouTube and pretty much look up almost anything, whether it's like online marketing or selling to high-end clients or unclogging your toilet or whatever, like you could find it. And the thing that is confusing is there's too much information on YouTube or elsewhere. And if you were able to get like the blueprint of whatever framework you need, you get rid of a lot of the noise out there and you just get the pure signal of what you need. The other thing that you get with courses typically is that connection with your teacher or whoever is teaching that course. And that gives you, a networking connection, number one. And the other thing is if you're in a course and there's other students, those are your peers, right? So if you have a way to network with them, other people that have skin in the game that are actually serious about it because you paid money. And you probably, can ask the instructor, hey, I want to form a group. Maybe they have a community in there already, right? So that the huge value is like sifting through and sort of eliminating the people that are not serious about whatever it is. Because that's the danger. Because like you could go and find some community that's free and you can find free content, but no one's vetted. So you have no clue the quality of that, connection.
And so those would be some great selling points for the advisor or money coach or CPA or whoever that is creating a course in 2025. Anybody who comes in, that's what they're thinking. Okay, the value of this group is I get a connection with the advisor, the CPA, the host, and then also the people that are in the group. So that value is still there, no matter what algorithms are doing or how searchable your course is, or, no matter which platform you put your course on. So through that lens, I agree. I think creating a course these days is still valuable. you have to be really specific in your marketing the course and speaking about the benefit for those who might buy. And I think you did that really well with your podcast. But the other thing I want to point out that I love about your podcast and all of your content online is that we get to know you, Doug, instantly. We get to know that you like pizza and beer and that you're just down to earth. And you even made a comment one time like, my favorite subject, me, and like started talking about something. So right there, you're giving people permission to truly be themselves, which I think is another piece that financial professionals really struggle with because of the whole blue suit thing. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I mentioned that I have an engineering degree, and like many engineers,
Yes.
that there's a lot of people that are slightly more introverted or don't communicate well. You don't have to be an engineer, but it turns out there's a lot of engineers or numbers people that like they're a little nervous and they're like, you know what? I just want to like give the facts. I don't want to like talk about myself. I'm a little nervous to talk about myself. And that's actually like your strength. Okay. So we don't think so, but like with all our flaws and the other, issues, or even maybe like just a phrase that you use all the time, like a verbal tick kind of thing, like that could be like your catchphrase. So when it comes down to it, it's absolutely exhausting to try to like put on an act. And if you can just be yourself and like pretend like you're chatting with a friend or a family member, that's going to make that connection. And, you don't have to, put on an act. You don't have to do anything like that. You could just totally be yourself. And it takes a little bit of time because I mean, the thing is like I do have to maybe amp up the energy because I'm pretty subdued at times. So if I'm going to record or getting ready for an interview like this, maybe I have a little extra caffeine and just talk with a little more inflection and like that sort of thing, which you could certainly develop over time. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to like put on a persona while you're producing your content on your podcast or YouTube or social or whatever it is, it's very tiring. And, just to go a little bit deeper, I'm talking about sharing your hobbies. So I meant, pizza and beer. I'm a simple man, right? Pizza and beer, that'll do the job.
Yeah.
And, that's a great time because even, not that great pizza is pretty tasty. So the thing is, you could go on these little tangents, talk about things. People usually find it a little amusing, but the bigger part is they have a connection because they're like, oh, you know what? My kids do that very same thing. I understand exactly what you're talking about, or whatever your thing is. And not everyone is going to relate to everything that you mentioned, but there's a subset of people that are interested in the things that you and your family and friends are also interested in. So you have permission to like talk about your hobbies, maybe some embarrassing stories, right? So this is an advanced thing, right? Embarrassing stories are usually hilarious, and you're just showing that you're human. Mm-hmm. And again, people relate. So if those are the best things. It's like horrible when it's happening, but I'm like, I'm going to have a good story from this. I'm curious, Virginia, do you have any embarrassing stories that you have shared?
Never.
None?
Anything embarrassing has never happened to me. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, I'll give you an opportunity if you want to share an embarrassing story with the audience right now.
I would have to like seriously think like what I mean, there's a million things I've done, but I would just have to really think like what would apply.
Yeah. And I'll fill in because I asked you and then I was like, I don't even have one handy right now. But podcasting wise, one time I did a great episode with a friend of mine, Amberly Grant. Uh-huh. So we were down here in the basement. She lives locally and she has a great podcast as well.
Yeah.
And we recorded and I was like, that was good. And then I was like, I did not hit record.
Yes.
But she's such a champ that she was like, it is totally okay. And I apologize like a million times. And we re-recorded it sometime in the future. So like that, some technical issues, things happen occasionally. And by the time I did that, I think I have recorded like 1,000 episodes. So I should certainly know better than to like not have the double check of like, are we recording? That sort of thing.
Yes.
So,
well,
anyway.
That reminds me, like even just recently, a fellow that I had met at PodFest years ago, we figured out, oh my gosh, we live in the same county, not in the same city, but same county, which is 10, 15 minutes away from each other. So I go up to his office. We record an episode together. I brought my camera because it's an audio only episode, but I was like, I want some video footage here. At the end of the interview, I'm turning off the camera and I saw it recording. Like I saw it. I know it was, but I must have hit something wrong as I'm turning off the camera and there was no recording. So all I had was just, a couple of snapshots of us together. And then, of course, he had the audio piece, but I ended up having to make one of those like still image audiograms instead of having actual footage. And so here I am, this like podcast professional, and I like totally jacked up my own video recording. So, it happens to everybody. So I guess between the two of us, that just takes the pressure off of anybody that's thinking, oh, I'm new, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, and it happens all the time. So tell me a little bit about, we talked about being yourself and speaking about the benefits of your course or your services, whatever the reason is that you choose to podcast. But talk about the power of building trust and why is voice and video so powerful?
When I started listening to podcasts, it was way back. It was like 2007. And it was beer-related stuff. So I was into homebrewing beer, and I listened to probably thousands of hours of like that person telling their stories, being themselves, sharing things about their hobbies and families and all those things. And it's amazing the amount of trust that you build with it. And I think it's because those people were being real, and there's something like slightly more intimate about like listening to long form content versus, I mean, back then they really didn't have like the short form video that we have now where it's scroll, scroll, scroll. But those thousands of hours made me feel like I'm friends with that person. So I totally understand that. And when I'm on the other side of the microphone now and I meet people, I'm like, they're like, I feel like I really know you. And I'm like, I totally get it. Cause sometimes people are cautious and they're like, I don't want to be weird, but I feel like I know all your stories and stuff, which is 100% true. And when you're selling, my courses were $500 to $2,000. And that's a lot of money for a stranger to pay me on the internet. And when you have a library of content, whether it's podcast or YouTube, and by the way, like I had, separate videos, but often I'm publishing just like a video podcast. Like that's where the world has moved now. And essentially like all those hours of listening and paying attention, it builds trust like nothing else, because they literally feel like they know you as a friend. And that's part of the reason why like it is really important to like be yourself. And there's other shows that they're faster. They're produced more, maybe like a TV show or edited that way, where they cut out the fluff, all the tangents and side stories that I tell. They cut all that out, and it's just the pure distilled content. And that's a great way to get information fast, but it's kind of a poor way to build the connection where someone is going to sign up for your course, or they're going to sign up to be a client of yours or get a one-off, analysis on their finances or whatever. Those cost $2,000 to $5,000 or, wherever you fall on the spectrum there. And for someone to turn over that amount of cash, they do need to trust you. And, the other portion of it is like, if they've consumed your content a lot, that has pretty much done the sales process for you. So it's sort of pre-vetted. If someone listens to my show and they know my general vibe and the stories and the way I approach things, they already know they want to work with me or not. It's a self-filtering mechanism that works really well. And again, you don't, if you're trying to act like someone else while you're producing this content, you're tricking the filter there. So like, I like the filter because people will like you and other people won't like you and you can't please everyone. So just, lean into being yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I know that some of your coursework and some of your expertise really ended up being in SEO and niching. And I bet you could talk on that for days and days and days. But could you give financial professionals listening some kind of high level, quick tips on either naming their show, naming their episodes, finding topics to share, anything like that you can share?
Sure. With, naming the show, that's certainly a personal thing, and I'm also horrible at branding. So I would say keep it simple. Like some of the AI tools are great at brainstorming. So, lean into that, just come up with a ton of ideas. The other thing is it's not a permanent decision. So if you have a good name, double check trademarks and copyright stuff so you don't step on anyone's feet or run into issues later. But essentially, if you need to, you can rebrand stuff. It's a problem that can be solved. It can be a pain in the butt, but you could figure out how to rebrand it, right? People do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then as far as like naming episodes, again, like you could come up with a handful of decent ideas, but now AI tools are very good at giving you great clickable titles. And I would generally aim for the titles that can do well on YouTube. So if they do well on YouTube, they could probably do a pretty good job on any podcast player. And, there's, different formulas that you can use where you put in like a certain result within a certain amount of time. Those always do really well. Whether it's, savings goals, like how to save X amount in a certain amount of time, like that sort of thing. Those do well because it's results driven and it gives you some timing constraint that usually impresses people when they're looking at the titles.
Yeah, numbers-driven titles are always some of the top clicked on of my clients anyways. So,
and then the other portion is like, different content that you might want to put in there. And I'll touch on this a little bit. So at the end of the day, we're trying to like sell our service. And there are people out there that they're totally unique and they're all like special snowflakes. But at the same time, they fit into a group. So one thing that is super powerful is to have an idea of like different avatars. So you can customize it for your own business, of course, but think about the family with sort of, a lower income, for example, or maybe the single mom, or maybe it's a single person or whatever. Maybe it's a senior citizen, right? So all these different people that could fit in. And something that's really powerful is to like interview or showcase those individuals. So someone out there thinks, hey, I'm pretty much like that person. I can totally relate to their stories. And, one thing that I did for my sales pages or when I did interviews, I would find one of my students that, was a single mom. And they're like, I was able to do this on limited time. Here's all the constraints that I deal with. And then there was the retiree that wanted to get a little more income, right? So again, someone else can relate to that person a little bit more. And you just want to like show people like, yeah, you are the special snowflake, but also there was someone else like pretty similar to you. And they were able to do this or they signed up with me and they have a great testimonial out there. And that connects the dots really easily for someone out there that's like on the fence.
yeah, absolutely. And how would you go about almost that same thing with podcasting? right? Because that's more on like the testimonial side for your course or your services. So can you translate that for us into podcasting?
Sure. So couple ways to potentially do this. One, if the person is a good communicator, you could actually interview them and say, do you want to join me on the show? I'd love to talk about your experience. I think it would be inspiring for other people that are, now like they want to be where you are right now so they can share their story. The other way is maybe they're a little bit more shy, but you have the broad strokes. So you could put together a little narrative where you share someone's sort of case study. You have to anonymize it and make sure that you're not giving away too many details, but you could say like, here's a story and people, you can relate to this. Now, the other thing you could do is sort of put that together and then kind of have a conversation with someone. So it's not like an interview, but it's more of a round table. So maybe you have a peer or someone else on your team, and you could talk through the details of like the challenges that person went through for the case study. And then they were able to overcome the challenges and they reached the point of whatever their goal was because they worked with you. So that it's fairly straightforward. So you could just take those stories or testimonials and then put it into, a story format.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And speaking of formats, there are all kinds of different opportunities in the podcasting and YouTube space. I say all the time, there are no rules. You can literally do what you want. And if you don't like a format that you started out with, you can change it. So that is a question I still get all the time, though, is like, what should I do? What's the best format? What's working these days? It's different for everybody. Would you share some of your experience around that with your multiple platforms and podcasts?
I don't treat the content too preciously. And I think, well, honestly, if people go to look at my channels, you'll see that I don't. So I've recorded all sorts of different formats. So I started my show called the Doug Show, very modestly titled, and I wanted to make it fairly easy for me to produce, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to publish 2 episodes per week. Oof. And I did that for like 4 some odd years, and then I eventually went down to 1 because I wasn't like I need to publish more. I was like, it's fine. So I just did 1 per week. But basically, those were solo episodes, unedited. All right. So I just hit record. And if I messed up, I just powered through and made it work. And that makes it a little bit easier. So that was one format. So the solo, unedited, just kind of raw version. And the thing is, I knew that I would switch it up. And about like not treating it preciously, I was like, I will test stuff all the time. So I've literally done a lot of interviews, right? So those are straightforward. I talk to someone about their successes or failures or whatever. I've also done sort of panel discussions where maybe you have 2 or 3 folks. You cover a topic. It's a bit of a round table. It could be, more organized where you have each person talk about a certain thing and you kind of go around, or it could be more like a active live conversation where you have a couple bullet points and you allow everyone to speak up whenever they want. And that could be totally fine. Those are pretty fun because you end up with organic conversations that, again, those are the kind of podcast I like. Some people might not like it, but the organic feel of being a fly on the wall, I love that. And those are the kind of shows I listen to. That's what I usually produce. Now, there's other formats too where maybe you do some reaction. So there's some news story or someone else produced content, and then you could talk about what you think about that. That's kind of a solo episode, but you could also have an extra person on there to go back and forth. One of the more kind of unique and technically challenging kind of episodes is a live recording. So I often go to, retreats like Camp Fi. I don't know if people are familiar with that. So Camp Fi's are really fun. I'll often record live there. So there's a live audience of 50 to 80 people or so, and then I'll have a couple people sit with me. And so that's a live show, but you could also make it more complicated by having other guests on the show. So there's, 4 microphones. I'm leading the circus and making it work. Sometimes I've had like people ask questions from the audience and that sort of thing where you have like live questions. Someone will come up and ask, and then we answer it live. So again, I don't treat it too preciously. Some of those, like, I can't do a live recording all the time, but when I have the opportunity, I do it. And what you'll find is like you'll enjoy some different kind of format more than another. I encourage people to test and have fun with it, because the big thing is if you're having fun talking about something, even if the person is not interested in the exact topic, if you're enthusiastic about it, people are going to probably be okay with that. And if you're laughing and you're having a good time, especially when there's other folks involved in the conversation, it's going to sound like a fun, good time. People will listen to it. So, there's no like specific length that I was going to say, like, if you're having a good time and it's entertaining, it could be as short as it needs to be or as long as it needs to be. Because I know that's another common question. What's the ideal length? However long it needs to be, but no longer than that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for giving folks some format ideas. I mean, you even shared a few that I hadn't actually thought of or witnessed. I haven't been to Camp 5, but it sounds amazing, and I'm so jealous every year.
Yeah.
So for sure, you may find yourself in some of the same circles as listeners because, being in the financial space and being interested in financial independence. I know there are some people that are still kind of discovering like, oh, there's a community around this. How cool. So anyways, that's more of like the personal interest side of the finances. But yeah, those questions around format, length, how to do, what to do are still some of the top things that I get asked, even though there's a ton of published content out there about it. So as a creator, that will still continue to happen. Like even for you, Doug, for the financial professional listening, even though you've created an episode about this thing, answering this question, you will still get asked. How have you navigated that? Do you send them the link to the episode where you answered that question, or do you create more episodes just phrased differently about that? How do you navigate that?
That's a funny one. Yeah, thinking back, I would get pretty frustrated, and I think maybe I wasn't getting enough sleep those years or whatever. I was working pretty hard in the beginning, but yeah, I'm like, I've answered this question like 80 times, and I have other content that I created, and you can't blame anyone, right? Because like maybe it's the first time that they saw your content, and they don't know where to look. There's so much out there, right? So generally, if I do have like a good answer where it's already answered out there in the world, I will point them in the right direction. That said, one thing that I haven't been doing as well at is creating content that is similar to content that I created in the past. And there is something slightly valuable with creating that new content just from a freshness standpoint. So if someone searches for some question that they have, they see an answer from 2018 and they're like, well, that might not be accurate anymore. And they don't know because they're not an expert. They're asking the question. So if someone is searching for how long should a podcast episode be and they see something from 2025, they'll probably look at that because that seems to be, perhaps more accurate because it's newer. So the hard part is there's value in like creating the same content again and again and saying, yep, it's the same as it was in 2018, or here's why it changed. It has changed. Things are different. People consume content a little bit differently, but it feels like you're repeating yourself, but there can be value in going ahead and like in doing that. For me, like I said, I have stopped doing some of that because it's not as fun to me. And that's, the different formats that I do. And I mentioned shutting down some of the courses and just deciding I'm not going to do courses anymore. Like I don't need to. And it's okay for me if I'm moving on to like different types of challenges and doing different things.
Well, and I think that speaks to your evolution as a business owner, your maturity into FI. Like there's so many stepping stones along the way. And at whatever point, creating those courses, marketing those courses, revamping those courses, marketing them again, like there's all these steps. And then you get down the road and you've been doing this for 10 years and you're like, I'm kind of done with that. And so that's similar to the rebranding thing that you brought up. You can change. You can do something different. You can mature. So were those decisions, though, to drop something that was working quite well and start something new? I'm sure that was tough. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was tough in certain ways, and I'll branch off to a side story. So around 2020, I think I've been doing like 20 to 30% less work each year, which was somewhat intentional. And there's some flywheel effect, some momentum where like business will still be fine for a little while, but eventually if you don't do much work, things kind of drop off. Like businesses require maintenance and work and effort and all that kind of stuff. This was all intentional though. So I was like, I'm going to try like working a little less and see how that goes. And financially, we've put ourselves in a position where that is a smart and totally fine thing to do. So as the business changed, me doing less work, I did decide like, hey, I am going to sunset these courses. And I did try to launch something else. So this is something where I was like, I should have actually called you, Virginia, because we would have had a complementary business.
Okay.
But eventually I decided to just scrap it. So here's what it was. So I sunset courses, and over the years, whenever something dried up from a revenue stream standpoint, I would somehow find something else and pivot into a different area, which is like, that's what entrepreneurship is about, right? Decisions with uncertainty, testing, like trying again, iterating, all that stuff. So I was getting a lot of questions about podcasting and a lot of the details that you were, asking about. And I was speaking at conferences on podcasting, and I love the format, right? So it's obvious, right? If people are asking you to do this stuff and asking you for advice, then there's an online course, there's an opportunity. So I ran a pilot workshop, where it was a podcast accelerator. 4 people launched their shows. It was awesome. So everything was good. It checked out. And I tried to launch this on a larger scale to my email list. So as a digital marketer, I have, the content on the podcast and YouTube, but I have an email list so that I can contact my customers directly and sell them stuff. And I launched this course, and at the time, I think I had launched 10 courses before. I know how to do it. I have like a great launching sequence and all this stuff. And I sold 0. So I had a list of 10,000 people, and I've sold them, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff. I sold 0 this time. This was the first time that I got a 0. You don't hear this story very often because no one wants to tell you about how they did all this stuff and then it didn't work. So that was hard. Like to your point, like that was hard, but I was able to deal with it because financially I didn't need the money to like put food on the table or anything. So fortunate and like a position of strength basically, where I was like, if this doesn't work, it's going to be okay. The other part is I knew that there was a chance that I would sell 0, because the other part is I had this email list, but it was a wrong market for the product that I created. It wasn't a group of people that wanted to do podcasts. It was people that wanted to have a website and a side hustle. So there was a mismatch on the product market fit. So I was like, I might be able to sell a few, but I'm not really sure. But I took the shot and it didn't work. And because I had successes in the past, I think I was okay with like that huge failure and telling the story, because I think it's important for people to like, not all of these things always work every time. You may have to iterate on it. You might have to realize, oh, this is a wrong market. Where if I came to you and I was like, you have an email list of people that want to do podcasting, you're doing production, I could teach them the other part. And that's where I failed to talk to people in my network to see like, hey, do you think there's a need? Do you know anyone that wants to go through it? And that sort of thing. But that was a little bit tough. But at the same time, I guess I knew the issues with trying to do what I tried to do.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many really great gems from that story. I really appreciate you sharing it. Like you said, a lot of people, most people, do not share those like epic failure moments, like the tough decisions, right? But I think that's so valuable because inevitably that is the fear in the back of people's minds when they launch anything, whether it's a podcast or a course or whatever. They think no one's going to listen. My mom might listen. And I'll share from a spousal standpoint. I don't even think my husband has ever gone to my website. Not that he's not supportive, but like it's not like he doesn't care. Like it's not for him. He's not going to launch a podcast, right? He's not into the personal finance space like I am. So the people closest to you may or may not jump on board, and that instantly feels like a punch to the gut sometimes. But then knowing that, it may or may not take off. But I also want you to speak to the power of tweaking and refining, because I know this was kind of like one of the most recent things, and then you were on your way towards sunsetting things systematically anyways. But back when, 15, 18, those kind of golden years before the pandemic when the online space was the wild, wild west still, there was a lot of action to be had in launching courses and memberships and programs and podcasts and all the things. And I think that longevity from being able to start when you started, Doug, and that is what really has allowed you to create the audience that you have that has bought courses over time. So can you speak to that longevity a little bit?
I love it that you asked this question. This is one of my big skill sets. So the other part in my background, I do have an engineering background, although I haven't done it in a while. I have a project management certification. I'm a PMP. So I basically looked at things through the lens of continuous improvement, using systems and then iterating and evaluating over and over again. So this is the part that a lot of people skip. I launched my course and it was fine. It did really well. But I wanted to improve the launch. Now, I've had friends in the past, they launched something one time and then they think, I'm going to go ahead and throw this in my email autoresponder, and they never tweak it. They don't even have enough data. So I'm like, I try to give them some advice, but they didn't do it right. Everyone wants a shortcut. What I did was I studied really hard and analyzed other course launches and essentially just iterated over and over again. So I launched quarterly and had a kind of a long feedback loop, but with enough time, 2 years in my case. So for about 2 years, I was optimizing different pieces, whether it was pricing or the testimonials or various things on the sales page or how many emails I sent out, testing webinars, live video and that sort of thing. So after 2 years, I tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. And then the launches were fantastic. So I optimized different areas. Don't try to change everything at once. It'll drive you crazy, but then you're also like, you have too many variables, so you don't know what caused what. So I would very slowly tweak these things. And then after 8 launches or so, it was working really well, number one. And then I wanted to have, some affiliates help me out, which created huge launches. I think the largest was like 70K. So it's like 70K in like 1 week. So this is a full-time salary. Like it's crazy, right? Like I had no idea like that kind of stuff was possible. And the other thing, after you get things optimized and you could bring some affiliates on board to, help sell. The other thing was to have like an evergreen funnel. And for people that aren't familiar, like with a launch sequence, you open the enrollment for a certain amount of time, like 1 week. And for an evergreen, then anyone can buy it at any time. But ideally, like they start the funnel. And I did some analysis and I saw the best window where someone was engaged was around 30 to 40 days. So they needed to build trust with me for a little while. I would send them good information. I would send them to a podcast. I would send them to a YouTube video, and they would eventually, trust me. So I was like, evergreen funnel is perfect in that, little over a month time frame. So that's what I set up. And it was only after optimizing over the course of 2 years that I was like, now it's time to roll this out in sort of a scaled out version where I don't need to babysit everything and anyone can buy the course when it's right for them throughout the whole year. So that worked really, really quite well. The bow on top here is like to test things and you launch it one time. Great. Now start figuring out what you need to tweak and just take it methodically, and you'll be able to improve your conversion rate and just make things a little bit more efficient along the way.
Thank you so much, because through that explanation, you were able to differentiate that quarterly launch, kind of hamster wheel in a way, but then also the thought process behind just allowing it to remain live all the time. And we call that evergreen, to where people can sign up at any point. And I think that's a mystery to someone who isn't really in the course creation space or hasn't done that before. They're thinking, well, wait, how often do I launch? Why? And, what are the mechanics behind this? So you were able to demystify that real quick for us. I really appreciate that. And just to bring it back to podcasting, I think there's a bit of experimentation and tweaking and reworking with podcasting in much the same way. And I'm not sure if you ever get to a point where your podcast is quote unquote evergreen, right? Where you just do the same thing over and over and it works like a charm, no tweaks needed, right? I think with algorithms and AI, and the world moves quickly and we need to as well. So are there things that you're still adjusting with your shows that you still, have going live?
I am looking at different formats. Going back to, one of the suggestions that I had for other people, I'm looking at my formats and trying to think like, what do I enjoy the most? What does the data tell me from all the places that I can get data and look at retention or click-through rate and that sort of thing, which I look at it, but it's not, I don't make full decisions based on that because I'm not going to play along with the algorithm, basically. So like I'm going to create the content that I want. And I think that's really important for me from a avoiding burnout standpoint. And to answer your question though, different formats. So I have a podcast called Mile High Fi. Carl Jensen and I started it. And then he got very busy. He's a very busy retired man. And he left the show. So I was like, I'm going to keep going because I really enjoy it. So I've tested different kind of formats where I have a guest host, or maybe I'll bring in a couple people. So just this morning when I was walking, I was thinking about having a bit of a round table with people that I've interviewed before. So instead of an update, just bring them in. We're going to talk about some topic, whatever we want to do. So just testing that kind of format. The other thing is typically my episodes are about 1 hour long, sometimes a little longer. But I was thinking, I have other things that I want to talk about. Maybe I could do a shorter episode, like a bonus episode, maybe once or twice a month, where it's inconsistent. I don't want to sign up for something where I'm like, I'm committing to this for a long time, but I'm testing it out. And some of those are going well. And I think maybe you gave me some advice when we chatted before, and you said, well, are there going to be other people? Because it's hard to be concise. Mm-hmm. And you're 100% right. I wanted to have these to be like 20 minutes, and they've been about 40 because I keep gabbing.
Well, generally podcasters like to talk. So I think that's a quality that we have. But yes. And so I want to allow you just for a second, right before we close here, you touched a couple times on things being sustainable for you as a human and avoiding burnout and structuring things in a way that are still fun and exciting for yourself. So how can someone think about their show through this lens?
Before we started recording, you mentioned that you looked at some of my content out there, and I started my YouTube channel in 2014, and I was inconsistent for a few years, but for roughly the last 8 years, I've been quite consistent, and I have probably a couple thousand videos on that Doug Cunnington channel, and I've produced probably about 1,000 podcast episodes as well. And I haven't burned out. I'm actually having a great time. And I even figured out how to add another show. Like, that's how much I enjoy it. I'm like, I'm going to add another episode and that sort of thing. So I think everyone has to figure out how they are personally. For me, I mentioned like not playing along with the algorithm, right? Because like that can lead you in a weird direction where you're potentially creating content that you don't really care about. And quick example, if I publish some video about like thrift stores or something like that, which I'm not very interested in, but that video blows up and I keep producing content about thrift stores, well, I'm going to get burned out because I'm not personally interested in that thing. However, if I really like guitars. There's a couple of guitars laying around me. I could talk about guitars all the time. And the point being, like, you should have like some level of interest. And then the key part is like to be self-aware of like what will burn you out. So it could be the pressure that you put on yourself to produce a specific episode at a specific schedule and all this kind of stuff where you're putting pressure on yourself. And I don't have that. I don't put that pressure on myself. Like I said, I don't treat an episode or content as like really precious. So I know that not every episode is going to be the best one. And I want to make sure that I could do this for the long haul. So going back to our conversation when we started, I produce a lot. I've produced it over many years, and it turns out any one individual thing is not that big of a deal. And I knew it was going to be like that as time went on. So that made it easier and easier to produce the content. And, you know, from an overall just like non-burnout standpoint, if you feel it coming and you're like, I'm starting to freak out and this is a little too much, figure out how to make it easier or less stressful. Everyone's a little different. And that's literally, you know, I mentioned the editing and just doing unedited episodes. That took a lot of the pressure off. In fact, if people check out my channel, you'll see I did a lot. I've done several hundred live streams. I wanted to eliminate the editing process of video. So I was like, I will do live streams. People are a little more patient and you don't have to edit them. So I tested that. It turns out I like the format. It helps you think on your feet. I've had different times where there were 50 or 100 people on and other times where there's like 10. Or when I first started, there were like 0 to 1, and I still did them anyway.
Yeah.
So just be aware of what burns you out and steer clear. Because like the big thing is like consistency over time. If you could do that, you're going to be fine.
Beautiful message to end with. Thank you so much, Doug. Could you tell us real quick where to find and follow you, tag along?
So you can find me over on YouTube or any podcast directory. So I have the Doug Show, which I think it's still called like Affiliate Marketing and Side Hustles, but I talk about marketing and online business. The post-fire content is over at Mile High Fi, and really it's like more advanced sort of fire topics. So I know there's a lot of financial advisor folks out there. So there's a good chance like you might be interested in the topics. It'll probably give you something to talk to your clients about, and your clients might be interested in it as well. So again, it's more advanced stuff. This is not like the basic fire stuff. It's a lot of lifestyle as well. So it's things that your clients could be interested in. Like, I will be retiring early, but I'm a little bit nervous about how I'm going to spend my time. We talk about that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of that goodness with us. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
Absolutely.